The laughter inside Magnolia Grand Hall rippled through the vast space, bouncing off its domed ceilings and glimmering chandeliers. A rich mix of roses, champagne, and vanilla-scented candles hung thick in the air. Everywhere I looked, there was perfection: immaculately folded napkins, crystal glasses catching golden light, a towering cake draped in sugared blooms. But inside me, nothing. Just a hollow silence. My name tag was missing. My chair was gone. "Oh no, Camille," my sister-in-law cooed with an exaggerated frown that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Looks like we miscounted." The bridal party exploded into laughter, sharp and jagged like shattered glass. Camille, wrapped head to toe in a Lara couture, gestured with her manicured hand toward the far corner. "You can squeeze in at the kids' table, Lila. Might be more your scene anyway." Even Ryan, my own brother, chuckled uneasily, eyes skimming past mine like a guilty child. He adjusted his tie, shifted in his seat, and stayed silent. The same brother who used to be my whole world now couldn't even find the decency to speak up. I stood frozen for a moment too long, blinking away the sting. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry. Not in front of them. Not today. I drew in a slow breath, letting the sting of embarrassment harden into resolve. "It seems I'm not considered family after all," I said smoothly, my voice steady despite the storm crashing within. Heels clicking against the marble, I turned and walked away, not glancing back even as I could practically feel Camille's smug smile following like a shadow, but they didn't know what I knew. I hadn't come to this wedding just to smile for pictures and play nice. I came prepared. When Ryan first told me about the engagement, I had been genuinely thrilled. I'd watched him tumble through years of shallow relationships, rarely letting anyone in. Then came Camille, polished, elegant, and venomous beneath the gloss. I saw the sharp edges behind the charm. We all did. But Ryan didn't, or maybe he refused to. When he asked me to help plan the wedding, I said yes without hesitation. I wasn't just Ryan's sister, I was one of the most sought-after event planners in Portland, someone who'd built her business from scratch, organizing luxury weddings for the city's elite. I had the contacts, the insider venues, the caterers whose dishes melted in your mouth like silk. But as the months went on, the signs began to show. Meetings were accidentally rescheduled without me. Camille made decisions without consulting me. Invitations went out without my approval. I was being edged out quietly, but intentionally. Still, I excused it. Told myself it was wedding stress, that Camille was nervous, and that Ryan would eventually notice. I was wrong. 2 weeks before the big day, I overheard Camille whispering to her bridesmaids at a cake tasting. "She's dying to be involved," Camille giggled. "It'll be fun to remind her who's really in charge." My blood ran cold. I could have confronted Ryan right then and there. Instead, I made another decision. I would give the performance they never saw coming. Back at Magnolia Grand, I slipped unnoticed into the service corridor, my breath shallow but my steps confident. I pulled out my phone and opened the event planning app I'd used to coordinate the entire wedding. Camille and Ryan had never updated the permissions after they began pushing me out. They thought it was just a glorified calendar. They were wrong. I had full control. An hour. That's all I had before the ceremony started. But that was enough. As I stood beneath the sterile glow of the emergency light, I realized something simple but powerful. They didn't just forget me. They underestimated me. They had designed this day to humiliate me, to erase me from my own brother's life. But I had laid every foundation they were standing on, and I still held the keys. If someone had told me 3 years ago that Ryan would sit quietly while his bride mocked me in front of 100 people, I would have laughed. Ryan was my rock, the one who stayed up with me through our father's final night, the one who sang with me at midnight when life got too heavy, the one who promised we'd never lose each other. But that version of Ryan was long gone. Now, there was only the echo of him sitting quietly, pretending not to hear my name being erased. And me? I wasn't going to pretend anymore. There was a time when I thought nothing could come between Ryan and me. Through every heartbreak, every family storm, every late-night coffee on the roof, we'd always found our way back to each other. But then Camille arrived. The first time I met her was at Ryan's birthday dinner. She was breathtaking. I won't pretend otherwise. The kind of woman who drew attention the moment she walked into a room, effortlessly magnetic in her designer heels and diamond smile. But under the sparkle, something colder lived. You could see it in the way she looked at people, or rather, through them. From day one, Camille never saw me as a sister-in-law. She saw me as competition. The signs came quickly, tight, rehearsed smiles, snide comments whispered just out of Ryan's earshot. "Oh, you still live in that cozy little apartment, Lila. How quaint." Or, "Ryan says you plan events. That must be so festive." Ryan always brushed it off. "She's just nervous," he'd say. "She wants to impress you." But the longer they were together, the clearer it became. I was being replaced. First, it was our weekly dinners turned into monthly coffee catch-ups. Then our long talks were downgraded into brief, edited group messages where Camille always had the last word. Even our mother, who tried to smooth things over with her usual diplomacy, began to look uneasy when Camille came around. And still, when they got engaged, I let it go. I congratulated them. I offered genuinely to help with the wedding as a gift. Ryan's face lit up like a kid again. For a second, I saw the brother I used to know. "Are you serious?" "That would mean the world to me," he said. And I meant it. I wanted to be a part of this new chapter. I thought maybe, just maybe, the wedding would bring us back together. But it didn't take long to realize I wasn't planning the wedding. I was just holding Camille's place until she felt comfortable enough to take over completely. The moment that truth really landed was during the venue tour. Camille had asked me to meet her at Ridgeview Estate, a renovated manor nestled in the hills outside Portland, known for its sprawling gardens and sun-drenched ballroom. I arrived early, notes in hand, ready to collaborate. She was already there, laughing with the venue manager. When I walked in, she barely looked up. "Oh, Lila," she said, feigning surprise. "We've already made our decision, but feel free to tag along." Her voice was syrupy sweet. But the message hit like a punch. In that instant, I wasn't the trusted sister. I wasn't the expert planner. I was decoration brought in to fill space and make her look generous. Still, I stayed. I reviewed the contracts, I secured permits, I scheduled vendors and double-checked logistics. I did it all quietly, behind the scenes. Even as Camille began casually taking credit at family dinners. "I've been handling most of the details myself," she'd say with a modest laugh. I bit my tongue and reminded myself, this was for Ryan. But then came the seating chart. It was 2 weeks before the wedding. I spotted it on the kitchen counter during a family brunch. My name wasn't at the head table. I wasn't near Ryan. I wasn't even near the adults. Table 14. The kids' table. When I asked Ryan, he barely looked up. "Camille thought it'd be fun lighten the mood, you know." "Fun," I repeated later that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. That's when it stopped being about Camille just being Camille. It became something darker, more deliberate. And what made it worse? Ryan was letting it happen. So I made a choice. If they wanted me to be the outcast, I'd play the role but on my stage. I still had back-end access to every reservation, every contract, every detail of their perfect day, because in the early weeks before Camille tightened her grip, Ryan had trusted me with everything. Camille never thought to lock me out. She never saw me as a threat. She should have. Over the next 2 weeks, I didn't cancel a single thing. Not yet. I simply restructured. Quiet changes, contingencies, backups. Clauses they hadn't noticed because they hadn't cared to read what they signed. I smiled through Camille's petty remarks. I nodded when Ryan avoided eye contact. I let them think they had won. And then today came. The missing chair, the forced laughter, the smirks and jabs like daggers to the ribs. They made their move, and now, here I was, tucked away in the service corridor, my phone aglow, the minutes ticking by as I watched the foundation of their fantasy wedding rest on the web I had spun. No one noticed me as I moved through the venue that last hour, quiet, composed, invisible. But soon, very soon, they would all see me, because I wasn't just the forgotten sister. I was the one holding everything together. The celebration was in full swing. Inside the glowing walls of Magnolia Grand Hall, Camille's perfectly styled bridesmaids floated from room to room, laughing and adjusting lip gloss with mirror-sharp smiles. The groomsmen, half-buzzed and fully dressed in designer tuxes, tossed back glasses of imported scotch like it was nothing more than water from the tap. And there, by the bar, stood Ryan. My brother, smiling like today was a scene out of some magazine-perfect fantasy. Maybe for him it was. For Camille, too. But I knew better. I saw the hairline fractures beneath the polished marble and golden trim, the ones they didn't know were there because I had put them there. They thought they were in control, that they'd pushed me out completely. But what Camille never realized was that from the moment they gave me full access to the planning platform, I didn't just manage the wedding. I owned it. Every thread in that tapestry, the caterer, the musicians, the guest list, even the timing of the champagne toast I orchestrated. She thought she had taken the reins. She only ever saw the pieces I allowed her to. I wasn't just the forgotten sister. I wasn't even just the planner. I was the architect. And as I watched it all unfold from the quiet corner of the room, I felt a strange kind of peace settle over me. The kind that comes when you've accepted what needs to be done. In the hallway outside the bridal suite, I caught a glimpse of Camille adjusting her veil in front of a massive gold-framed mirror. She looked flawless, an image plucked straight from a luxury bridal editorial. All grace and gleam, and yet, beneath it all, still cruel. When our eyes met in the reflection, she didn't blink, just said casually, "You don't have to stay for the ceremony, Lila. We wouldn't want you to feel out of place." There was no venom in her tone, just that unbearably polite poison she was so skilled at delivering. I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. A flicker of surprise cracked across her features before she masked it again with her usual smirk. Camille always believed she was 2 steps ahead. Let her. The ceremony unfolded like a scene from a movie. White petals, soft music, strings humming just right. But every second felt like a pin to the heart. I stood at the back, not among family, not even close to friends. People offered forced smiles and quick nods, no real warmth behind them. I noticed everything, the sideways glances, the whispering behind half-covered mouths, the pleased expressions on Camille's parents' faces when they saw me hidden away like some distant cousin they barely remembered. And Ryan, my Ryan. He stood under the floral archway, beaming as Camille glided down the aisle. I searched his expression for anything guilt, hesitation, regret. There was nothing. Just devotion, blind and blinding. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, I swear Camille's eyes darted toward me for the briefest moment, as if daring me. But I stayed silent. I wasn't here to stop their wedding. I was here to let it happen. Later, during cocktail hour, I drifted out into the garden. String lights twinkled overhead, the sound of clinking flutes and laughter swirling in the air. Guests buzzed about the evening to come, the 5-course dinner, the decadent dessert bar, the jazz band flown in from Savannah. They had no idea what was waiting. They didn't know about the vendor calls I made last night, the revised contracts, the contingency plans I activated. They believed they were moments away from a flawless celebration. But I knew the truth. Standing beneath those twinkling lights, I felt its sadness, yes. But pride, too. This wasn't about being left off the seating chart. It was about something deeper. Ryan hadn't just chosen Camille over me once. He had done it again and again, each time pretending not to notice the growing distance, the silence, the way she chipped away at what we used to be. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I had something neither of them could steal control over how this story ended. Inside the reception hall, everything looked perfect, pristine, elegant. Months of work, down to the last monogrammed menu and glimmering place card. All mine, all made to impress. None of them knew the strings had already been severed. I took one final walk past the head table, the one where my seat should have been. Camille met my eyes again, and this time, her smirk twitched just slightly. It was enough. Because the countdown had begun. And when the clock struck midnight, the illusion would shatter. The first crack appeared as guests began finding their seats. I stood by the doorway, watching. The maitre d' leaned toward Camille's hand-picked coordinator, the one she brought in at the last minute to replace me, and whispered something that drained the color from her face. She clutched her tablet, lips parting in panic. Camille, basking in post-ceremony praise, hadn't noticed yet. And Ryan? Still smiling, still oblivious. But not for long. From the back of the reception hall, tucked quietly behind a cluster of potted palms, I watched the unraveling begin. The maitre d' leaned toward Camille's hand-picked coordinatora, young, overly eager woman she'd hired last minute to replace me, once she decided I wasn't polished enough for her vision. His voice was hushed but urgent, and when he handed her his phone, I saw her face blanch from calm professionalism to pure panic. She nodded shakily, eyes darting toward the kitchen. The dominoes had started to fall. Camille, of course, was still smiling, soaking in compliments like they were rays of sun. And Ryan? He stood beside her, as usual content to coast, blissfully unaware that the structure around them was seconds from cracking. Then came the second sign. The lights above flickered. The band, once humming smooth jazz through the air, started packing their instruments in near silence. Guests turned their heads, confused by the abrupt change in energy. The coordinator hurried toward the bandstand, speaking too quickly, voice pitched high with panic. "Why are they leaving?" Camille's hiss cut through the room. Her voice, sharp and shaking, reached more ears than she realized. The staff began retreating from the dining floor, whispering among themselves. Servers who had moved like a well-oiled machine just moments before now hovered near doorways, unsure whether to stay or go. No champagne, no hors d'oeuvres. The kitchen doors closed, silent. Camille's dream, curated to the last shimmering ribbon, was beginning to decay right before her eyes. I slipped out to the garden again, easing into a seat at the edge of the lawn as chaos unfurled like a private performance. Only I knew the full script. Every contract had been booked under my company's name. The caterer, the band, the florists, the drivers, even the custom dessert bar that was supposed to roll out at midnight. 2 nights ago, I enacted the contingency clauses, breach of terms, suspended services, indefinite pause, legal, quiet, untraceable until it was too late. And now it was too late. The third and final sign came when Camille stormed into the service corridor, heels clapping against the tiled floor, her voice cracked and brittle. "What is going on?" she barked at her coordinator, who was nearly trembling. They said the payments were reversed," she stammered. "Nothing's confirmed. The contracts are frozen pending authorization." Camille's breath hitched. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, stepping from the shadows with slow, measured calm, "that your wedding is currently on hold." Her head whipped toward me. Shock cracked across her flawless face. "You." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You did this." Before I could respond, Ryan appeared behind her. His eyes flitted between us, wide with alarm, confusion beginning to chip away at his carefully maintained smile. "Lila," he said, his voice tight. "What's going on?" I tilted my head, letting the truth land like ice water. "Camille wanted my help with the wedding," I said evenly. "So I helped." Camille's eyes narrowed into slits. "You vindictive little careful," I interrupted gently. "You wouldn't want to cause a scene." That stopped her. Because public image? That was Camille's true god. And right now, murmurs were spreading like wildfire outside the hallway. Guests were looking around, puzzled, unsettled. The band was gone. The kitchen shut down. Servers gone missing. Vendors gathering in the parking lot. And Ryan, me brother, the man who once promised nothing would come between us, stood silent beside his unraveling bride. "You can't do this," he said. His voice was less angry now, more heartbroken. "This is our wedding." "And I spent months making sure it would be perfect," I replied, "until you both decided I didn't matter." Camille's mask cracked. For the first time, the poise crumbled. "This is petty. You're ruining Ryan's day." "Ryan's day?" I echoed softly. "The same Ryan who laughed when I was told to sit at the kids' table, who watched you mock me, push me aside, and stayed quiet for a year." The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation I could have spoken. Ryan didn't deny it. He didn't even lift his eyes. I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "Consider it a lesson." Camille grabbed Ryan's arm and pulled him aside, whispering furiously. I watched it happen like I had seen it in a dream, her eyes wild, her lips moving quickly. She wasn't panicking for him, or even for the marriage. She was panicking because her perfect illusion was shattering in front of donors, clients, and old family friends. Her father's partners, her social circle, her stage. And now, every eye in the building would turn toward the glittering bride and her empty ballroom. No food, no music, no magic. Just one lingering, unspoken question. What happened? I turned to leave, the sound of my heels echoing back through the corridor they once told me I didn't belong in. But just before I stepped into the cool night, I glanced back. "Oh, and Ryan," I said softly, not even turning around. "Still think I was overreacting?" I didn't wait for a response. As I stepped out into the crisp night air, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I just felt clarity. They had underestimated me, written me off, cast me aside. But I had never been the extra. I was the foundation. Behind me, the once vibrant sounds of celebration had turned to confusion. Glasses clinked uncertainly. Conversations lowered into murmurs. What had once been a meticulously staged evening now felt like a theater where the actors had fled mid-show. I stood beneath the glow of the garden's string lights, watching through the grand windows as guests started to sense something was off. No servers, no champagne, no music, just silence. The kind that settles in right before everything falls apart. Inside, Camille's mother rose from her table, clutching her pearl necklace, whispering anxiously to a family friend. Ryan's groomsmental ways, the last to notice, tried to play it cool, but even their confidence was beginning to crack. The final act had begun. It didn't take long. The heavy doors burst open, and Camille stormed out onto the garden path, heels stabbing the stone with fury. Ryan trailed behind her, pale and silent, like a man who had just realized the dream he bought into was turning into something else entirely. "Lila," Camille hissed, her voice low but loaded. "Fix this. Now." Ryan's eyes scanned the gathering guests who had followed them outside half-drunk and wide-eyed, their gossip now focused entirely on the unraveling bride. I tilted my head. Calm. "Fix what?" I asked. "The vendors followed the contracts you both signed off on me handling everything, remember? Of course they didn't. They never checked the fine print. They never thought I mattered enough to." Camille's lips curled and her voice pitched with heat. "We trusted you." Ryan flinched. He knew we all knew they hadn't trusted me. They had used me. "You mean you used me?" I said softly. "Big difference." Camille's face turned crimson, but it was Ryan who looked crushed. Finally, the weight of what he had allowed began to show on his face. He opened his mouth, searching for a defense, but none came. He glanced back at the crowd watching from the lawn, all of them bearing witness to a scene they'd never forget. "You're ruining everything," Camille said, voice cracking now. "My parents, their friends, our guests are inside wondering where the food is, the music. Do you think this makes you look strong? It makes you look pathetic." I stepped forward, my voice low, unwavering. "You made sure I didn't have a seat tonight. You laughed when I was humiliated. And Ryan, he let you. He let you do it. Again. And again." Ryan's eyes dropped to the stone beneath his shoes. Camille snapped. "So what? You thought you'd sabotage your own brother's wedding? What kind of person does that?" I took a breath, deep and steady, the kind who's finally done begging to be treated like family. More guests were trickling into the garden now. Polite curiosity had given way to open fascination. I caught a glimpse of Mr. Franklin, Ryan's boss. Aunt Sylvia, who never left the dessert table at any event, stood watching near the hydrangeas. The whispers were spreading. "Did you plan all this?" Ryan asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "No," I replied honestly. "I planned the wedding you asked me to plan. But when I realized I wasn't invited anymore, when Camille made sure I wasn't even welcome, I stopped protecting it." Camille started to step forward, but Ryan lifted his hand. "Don't." His voice had cracked, the weight too much to keep steady. "You could have told me," he said, more to himself than me. "Told you what?" I said. "That your fiancé was planning to humiliate me? That you were too busy looking the other way to notice?" He didn't respond, because we both knew he wouldn't have believed me. He never did. And I saw it then, the collapse. Not just of the wedding, but of the story Ryan had been telling himself for years. That Camille was just misunderstood. That things would work themselves out. That his sister would always be there no matter how they treated her. Now, nearly everyone was outside. No music, no dancing, No dinner, just cold air and sharper truths. Camille grabbed Ryan's arm. "I'm not doing this out here," she snapped. "Inside, now!" But Ryan didn't move. Not yet. Ryan didn't follow her. He stood still, rooted in place, looking out at the crowd, the confusion, the pity, the judgment. Faces once filled with celebration now wore masks of quiet discomfort. But when his gaze found mine again, I saw something different. Not the sister he thought was overreacting, the person who had quietly held everything together for years. "Lila," he said, voice cracking. I shook my head. "Don't." Then I turned and walked away, leaving them under the garden lights, surrounded by broken toasts and unasked questions. I didn't need to say more. They would feel it. Not just tonight, but long after, the weight of what it cost to treat family like a footnote. And the night wasn't even over. The chill in the air sank deeper as I left Magnolia Grand behind, walking toward the small gravel lot behind the garden. I didn't rush. I didn't have to. Inside, I knew Camille was unraveling, scrambling to salvage the spectacle. And Ryan had be frozen, finally seeing the foundation he'd built his fairy tale on starting to crack beneath him. At my car, I paused and looked back at the glowing windows. From this distance, I couldn't hear the whispers, but I could imagine them. The band already halfway down the freeway, the caterer spacking up dishes that would never be served, the vendors explaining calmly that contracts had been voided. Camille's grand wedding, the one designed to elevate her status, impress the Caldwell guests, and erase me, was over before the main course hit the table. But it was never just about the wedding. It was about every little moment that came before it. Every time they made me smaller. Every time they smiled while I faded into the background. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages. The first was from Mom, who had put it together faster than most. "I hope you're okay. Call me when you're ready." Then a few distant cousins, silent at the reception, but not blind. "You didn't deserve any of that. We get it now." And finally, Ryan. Dozens of messages. Some angry, some confused, some written like the brother I used to know. But it was the voicemail, the one he left at 3:13 a.m., that stayed with me. "Lila, please. I messed up. I should have stopped it. I should have done something." "You were right." Camille's furious, but that's not the point. "I was wrong. Please just call me." I played it twice, and for the first time in a long while, I cried. Not out of sadness, but out of release. 2 days later, we met at a coffee shop, one we used to visit after our dad's chemo treatments. The place still smelled like vanilla and burnt espresso, still played old indie records on a loop. Ryan looked exhausted. The man in front of me wasn't the smiling groom from 3 days ago. This one had dark circles under his eyes. His posture slumped like the truth had finally settled across his shoulders. We sat in silence. Then finally he said, "You were right." I stirred my coffee slowly. "About what?" "All of it," he admitted. "Camille, the wedding, everything. I let her treat you like you didn't matter. I let everyone treat you like that. It was the apology I never thought I'd hear. I thought you'd always be there," he said. "No matter how far I let it go. No matter how much I looked away." I studied him, and for the first time since the engagement, he wasn't hiding behind excuses. There was no Camille to spin it for him, no parents watching, whispering about image. Just Ryan, my brother. "That's the thing," I said quietly. "I would have been, but even the strongest people break when no one holds them up." He nodded, eyes shining. "I'm sorry. And maybe I could have unloaded it all years of resentment, disappointment, invisibility. Maybe I could have told him every moment that chipped away at who we used to be, but I didn't need to, because I had already let it go. The wedding became legend in our circle, not because it collapsed, but because no one could explain how. Camille naturally blamed vendor errors and unforeseen logistical chaos. She told her version to anyone who would listen, but the truth clung to the silence between glances, the polite nods, the conversations that shifted when she entered the room. And in the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild. Not just the bond with Ryan who, to his credit, worked to earn back what he had lost, but myself. For so long, I had clung to the idea of belonging, of carving out space in a family that only seemed to welcome me if I stayed quiet, agreeable, and small. I tried to mold myself into a version they'd accept, shrinking bit by bit until I barely recognized who I was beneath the smiles, but I was done with that. 1 year later, I stood in the gardens of a new venue Riverstone estate clipboard in hand, overseeing the final touches of someone else's big day. The setting sun bathed the lawn in gold. String lights flickered on above the tables. The scent of peonies and lemon cake lingered in the air, and this time, everything felt right. Because this time, I wasn't a placeholder. I wasn't a shadow behind the curtain. I was seen, respected, trusted. The bridea, kind, nervous woman I'd worked with for nearly a year rushed over and wrapped me in a grateful hug, her eyes shining with joy. "You made it all feel so easy," she whispered. "Thank you." And in that quiet moment, I realized what that night at Magnolia Grand had truly taught me. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about ruining someone else's fairy tale. It wasn't even about getting even. It was about finally knowing my own worth and refusing from this moment forward to let anyone, not even the people I loved most, make me forget it again.